All right, so we're going to be talking about how to set up a News Rails app, and we're going a little bit about the process in that how Rails handles web requests. So the first thing to do, we're going to create our Rails app. So we're going to do Rails. We're going to use 5.1.7. That's the specific version of Rails I want to use right now. We're going to do new because we're going to create a new app. We're going to call our app setlist because we want an app that's going to track our songs. We're going to use -t here because Rails uses Minitest by default, and we're going to be using RSpec, so we use -t. We're going to do database equals PostgreSQL. That's going to be our database that we use. We want to set that instead of default. We're going to skip Spring. Spring is a application preloader that speeds up development by keeping our application running in the background. We don't need that here, so we're going to skip it. And we're also going to skip TurboLinks. And TurboLinks is something that will allow faster page loading using Ajax. But there are some edge cases that it has, so we're not going to use that here as well. And we hit enter, and it's going to create this all for us. It's going to bundle, it's going to pull down any gems we may need. And I'm going to cd into the setlist directory. Fantastic. So we are in a Rails default installation, and it comes with some gems that we all need. And the first thing I usually do when I get here is that I take out all the commented stuff. Because it's more information than I need. And we're going to add some gems of our own. I'm going to take out ByBug here, and we're going to add in Pry. I just prefer Pry over ByBug. It's personal preference. We're going to need RSpec-Rails. We are going to need Capybara. We're going to need Launchy. Yeah. Okay, those are all the ones I need. Cool. So I'm going to save the file, and then we're going to run bundle install, or bundle for short. What this does is that, well, you should run bundle every single time you modify your gem file, because they'll check your gem file to see if there's any kind of changes or anything that we need to re-download, and it'll pull in everything we need. Cool. It looks like I already had everything previously. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to get RSpec installed by doing Rails G RSpec install. This is going to create some files for us. It's going to create a .rspec file with some RSpec configuration stuff there. It creates a spec directory. This is going to be where our tests are going to go, and it's going to create a Rails helper, which holds Rails-specific configurations in your RSpec, and a spec helper where we keep specs that all the things that don't depend on Rails. Cool. So the next step is that the big picture is that we want to create a page that when a person visits it, they're going to see all the songs, and we're going to be at songs. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to make a directory for our feature tests. So it's in spec features, right? And now, since we're testing that we can see all of our songs, we are going to go ahead and make a song subdirectory. So we have feature songs. And now we're going to create a test file. And we're going to call it user can see all songs spec.rb. It's very important that the file we create ends in _spec, because without the spec part of the file name, RSpec will not run it. Excellent. So let's go on and write our test. First, we're going to do is require Rails helper, because it's going to bring in all the stuff we need. And we're going to do this RSpec.describe songs index page type feature do. Cool. And we're going to do it can see all songs, titles, and play count. Do. Cool. So essentially here we have a describe block, and this describe block is generally giving us the the big context of how we're doing it. So we're saying that when we visit the songs index page, that's going to say like, hey, in this describe block, everything inside here is going to be related to the songs index page. And the it block is the individual test, right? So we're going to see all songs, titles, and play count. So what we're going to do is that for this test, what we're going to divide up this test into 3 sections. I call it like the setup, the action, and the assertions. The setup is like, well, we want to check that all songs are there. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some songs. The action is that we are going to visit the page that gives us the songs. That's going to be the songs index, and then we're going to do some assertions to make sure the songs are there. So we're going to do song create. Oops, song1 equals song.create, and we're going to create title. Like you, the length is 208, the play count 2, 4, 3, 0, 8, 6, 7. Another story that we were talking about we're going to do, we want the time play count. We have a length here. The length will come into play to a different class, so we're just going to put that here right now just to make our lives a little easier in the future. Oops. Someone's going to call me maybe. Length is going to be 199. Play count is going to be 1, 2, 1, 1, 4, 7, 2, 2, 1, 7, 2. Cool, and we create 2 songs. The next is the action. What are we going to do to make this the point of this test? So what we're going to use is that we're going to use the Capybara gem, and the Capybara gem gives us a number of methods that'll let us do things. So what we're going to do is that we're going to visit songs. And this is the action. When we visit songs, what it's going to do is that it's going to spin up a headless browser, like virtually visit the songs, and every single thing on that page is going to load into a page object that we can now run tests on. So that's our action. Now our assertion is going to look like this. Expect page to have content song1.title. Expect page to have content, and this one we're going to do a little different. I want there to be like a little more specificity as to what's going to be on the page. So we're going to do play count, and we're going to interpolate song1 dot play count. Oops. Cool. And we're going to do the same thing for song 2. All right. So what we're going to do is that we are going to run the test. Cool. So one thing that happens here is that it's going to say that I have no song, uninitialized constant song. But the problem here is that it is seeing a database, and because I've done this before, it's not going to, we should see a no database error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Rails DB drop. Because I've worked in an application called setlist previously, the database still exists on my computer, so I'm going to run Rails DB drop to get rid of it. And if you're running, you don't need to do this if you've never created a setlist application on there, but I'm going to show you what it looks like. Having dropped the database, I'm going to run RSpec now. If you've never set up a setlist application on your computer, you should get this error where the database setlist test does not exist. So what it's saying is that we don't have a database that matches. So we need to run a Rails DB create in order to create that setlist test database. And we see that. It has done that. We run RSpec. And we see here that we get the error before that it's going to complain that it doesn't know anything about a song. And this is kind of like the same thing we see when we're working regular Ruby, right? When we have uninitialized constant song, it says that I don't know anything about a song class. Let us make a song class. That's fine. So we're going to go up here in our app, and because it's going to be a model, because it represents something, we're going to put it in our models folder. And we are going to create a song model, song.rb. That is singular. And here, what we're going to do is that because we want this to be database back, like we're going to want to store songs in the database, we need to make it inherit. It needs to have all the active record stuff. So we do that by doing class song, and it's going to inherit from application record. And why application record? Well, we have application record here, and that inherits from active record. So that's how we go ahead and get that. The reason why we have this intermediary step is that, like, why don't we just inherit from active record previously? So the idea here is that if we want to have some model that contains some shared methods and behaviors, we can put that here instead. Cool. So let's go back here, we'll run the test again, and we'll see what we get. We see here a lot of stuff, but we're generally looking up here, right? And usually when we see this PG here, that means that we are dealing with the database level, and it says that relation songs doesn't exist. What this means is that we do not have a songs table in our database, so we need to go and do that. We're going to need a migration in order to create a table. And anytime we need to alter the structure of our database, we're going to do so with a migration. You may also use a migration to do other things like creating a table, adding or removing a column from a table, renaming a table or a column. Rails gives us some built-in syntax for generating migrations. I'm going to show you that right here. We're going to do Rails G migration. We're going to generate a migration. We're going to create songs. The title is going to be a string. The length is going to be an integer. And the play count is also going to be an integer. And we see here that it's created this file for us. Let's take a look at that file. It's in the DB directory. And we see here that it's timestamped, and we see like it looks like, hey, it's going to create a table. We're going to have a title, it's going to be a string, length is going to be an integer, play count is going to be an integer. That's great. Whenever I create a migration, I always open the migration to make sure I haven't spelled anything wrong. One thing I want to do here is that it will show you that you can modify this directly, and I'm going to add .t.timestamps here, which means that this table will have, every row will have, there will be now columns for the last time this a record is updated or modified or created. Cool, so we've created this migration. The next thing we need to do is run the migration. And we do that with a Rails DB migrate. And that looks like it went and worked. So we run the test again. And it says that no route matches songs. Well, let's see, we can look at our routes by opening up the routes file. But we can also do Rails routes, and we can see what routes we have built in. Well, we currently have right now. And we see that we don't have any routes defined. So we need to define it in routes.rb. Cool. So we're going to go to our routes file. And we are going to add our routes, right? So we're going to get songs, because when we do visit songs, it's going to be get request. And we are going to send that to songs index, meaning that we want to go to the songs controller and we want to go to the index action. Remember that an HTTP request includes both the verb, in this case get, and the path, songs. The second argument here, the songs index, tells what Rails controller we want to go to and what action. So when we have that, if we run Rails routes again, we can see that we have defined some things. We have the prefix songs, we have a verb get, the URI pattern, and the controller action we're going to go to. So again, this means that whenever get verb is used in request path songs, the application will look at the songs controller and look for an action method in there called an index. Don't worry about the format piece of that yet. That's not important right now. That's going to be something we talk about a little later on. And so we run our test again. Uninitialized constant songs controller. So we don't have a class, we make a class. And that goes in the controllers folder. Want to make a note that controllers are plural, models are singular. And we are here in our songs controller file. Let us add the stuff we need. All right, we're going to inherit from application controller. And let's take a look at that right now in application controller and here's some action controller base. Don't worry about this protect from forgery right now, but essentially what we want to talk about is application controller. This is the file that all other controls inherit from. And this is very similar to how we have an application record, right? This is something that we could put in here that will let us have all controls, we can share behavior across all controllers. So let's run our test again. Now to whack this error. And we see no action index cannot be found for silence controller. That means that in our silence control, we don't have index action. Def index and cool. We run the test again. And it says songs control index is missing template for this request format and variant. Cool. This means that it's missing the template. So remember the HTTP requests of both, HTTP consists of both requests and responses. We have set up our app to receive a request, but we haven't told it how to respond. By default, Rails is going to try to respond by rendering a view. It automatically looks for a view folder with the same name as the controller, and then look for a template file with the same name as the action method. So what we're going to do is that we need to go and make ourselves a songs folder in the view. And now we have songs. We're going to add a index.html.erb file. Cool. So we've created that. It's blank right now. We're going to run a test again and see what it complains about. So right now, Capybara isn't finding the text we want in the view because the view is empty, right? So we're going to add stuff to the view. Let's make this H1 all songs, and let's do this. Oops. I am not the best person at typing, unfortunately. Oops. Cool. So essentially we're saying that like, hey, we want to send to this view collection of the songs, iterate through the collection, display that information. And let us run the test to see if that worked. And it says undefined method used for nil class. So it's saying that songs is nil. And this makes sense, right? Because we haven't defined our instance variable songs. We define instance variables in our control action to make them available in views. So let's go back to our songs controller. And we're going to do that. At songs equals, oops, song.all. And let's run our test again. And cool, it all works. Fantastic. And that is generally how we set up our Rails app and kind of run these tests. And when we think about it, using this TDD approach is really kind of fantastic because it kind of walks us through how Rails handles like the kind of flow information, right? When we get a request, HTTP request, and it's going to check that routes file. That routes file is going to figure out, like, okay, where does this go? I'm like, all right, so we're going to go from this routes file. We're going to an appropriate controller and action. The control action is going to grab the appropriate model, information from a model, and then send that all to a view that gets returned to the user. Thanks for watching.